The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15, Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, it's repeated on Wednesday evening at 9:30. Our email address is vocaliowa@mchsi.com. We have our phone numbers here. My number is area code 515-276-3956 in Des Moines, Iowa. And John's number is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa, and two different areas in which we focus our attention is number one, in influencing public policy regarding child protection issues, and secondly is a hands-on project in which we assist people who call for information regarding their interaction with the Department of Human Services and the Juvenile Court. We're not attorneys, so we don't hold ourselves out to give legal advice or to practice before the bar on your behalf, but we know that you have an interest in solving a case if you're involved with the DHS, and that you also have the right, if you have the information, you can pursue many of the elements of these cases yourself with or without an attorney. And we found out that sometimes parents have just as much success in countering their administrative problems with the DHS themselves than they do if they engage an attorney. So if you're interested in saving cash, attorneys can cost a lot of money, and you can save a lot of that by doing the work yourself. Obviously, it may be easier in your mind to turn things over to somebody who can skillfully handle these tasks, but skillful handling of tasks can cost you $100, $150, $400 an hour, whatever. The costs are absolutely enormous when you go into these things. Well, what would happen if there had been a child protection center in the little town of Bethlehem? I wrote up a brief report, and I looked at the date when I first came up with this idea from Scripture itself. What would have happened if CPS, Child Protection Services, intervened in Bethlehem? If there had been a child protection office in Bethlehem, CPS could have stolen Christmas. I wonder what the narrative and assessment might look like. A teen mother-to-be was found in a cattle shed, about to give birth. The underaged mother said she tried to get safer quarters, but they were not available. The surroundings were extremely poor, and there were animals nearby. The crib area was nothing but a feeding trough with straw in it. She was accompanied by a young man she claimed was her intended husband. She told this worker, that is the author of the narrative, that she had walked most of the way to get to Bethlehem and rode a donkey part way. She admitted that she had no prenatal care and did not have a doctor. When the CPS worker asked about her family, she mentioned a cousin named Elizabeth, and she reported that Elizabeth was up in years and had recently delivered a son. She did not talk about other network family support people. The teen mother said that she was a virgin, and she said that the father of the child was not the one who was accompanying her in the stable. The mother of the child had not made appropriate choices in the company she keeps and in the care she has sought for herself and for her son. The teen mom has limited family support and is unable to attend adequately to the care of an infant child. The utterances about being a virgin mother leads us to believe the unfortunate teen mom was suffering from serious mental disorders. It is for this reason that the child was referred for a comprehensive program of counseling. It is obvious that the safety of a newborn child in this environment cannot be guaranteed. It is recommended the child be removed from the couple and placed in intensive foster care, and that the adequate services be made to the mother, and that Mary and Joseph have supervised visitation. The abuse is denial of critical care of an infant. In a later narrative, the assessment addendum, someone noted this information for the child. Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Apparently, he had been returned to his parents in the meantime. There was an addendum to the report which stated that the mother and the boy's stepfather had fled the jurisdiction to escape an edict which would have involved doing away with the children under the age of 2. In another incident, an assessment was prepared because of a report of further denial of critical care. At age 12, the boy was referred once again. The boy's family had traveled a considerable distance to attend a religious conference. The families who attended traveled in a caravan. When the conference concluded, the parents failed to make certain that the child was in the caravan. It was reported that the family did not discover that the child was not with them for 3 days. This meant it took 3 days to retrace their steps and yet another day to find the boy. He was found in the temple and talking with the intellectuals. This was not an age-appropriate activity. The child of 12 cannot be safely left for 7 days in a strange city without funds, without food, and without adequate supervision. The violation, again, is denial of critical care and failure to protect. So you see, even in those days, it could have happened that this whole story in Bethlehem could have been greatly distorted if child protection people were there to protect this child. Then, of course, God's plan would have also been disturbed, and we might never have had Christmas. Well, that story is about 5 years old, and I had never heard anyone come up with a story like that, except that since then I've heard it told several times, stories similar to that. It's a shame that we see the CPS intervening in families. It seems as though through the centuries, however, that intervention was not always that necessary. For some reason, we believe that we have made things so much better because of the intervention of the Department of Human Services. Well, we're going to take a slight bend here from our discussion. Don, a federal judge bounces a lawsuit out over rather strange. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with children's rights or adoptions and so forth, but it does have something to do with the way the courts behave. We won't go into the whole story, but this has something to do with how we handle discrimination. Don?
Okay, John, thank you. This was written by an attorney at law, Roy Hollander by name. Must be out of New York. He starts out as the document saying, federal judge bounces lawsuit over ladies' night into the street. Men's rights suffer defeat in dismissal of civil rights class action suit against New York City nightclubs. The decision failed to end nightclub discrimination that charges guys more for admission than ladies. The federal judge ignored two prior decisions from the same court that ruled females had been discriminated against in a virtually identical situation. Nearly 40 years ago, two federal male judges assured that females could not be treated differently by businesses serving alcohol for on-premise consumption. Since then, such businesses dared not discriminate against ladies, but freely did so against men. Now they will continue their discrimination against men. Perhaps in America, as in Orwell's Animal Farm, some are more equal than others. The attorney for the plaintiff's class of men remarked, the dismissal is consistent with the discrimination embedded in many of America's institutions over 40 years of feminists demanding and receiving potential treatment at the expense of the right of the guys. The feminists call for equality, but just equality of benefits, not burdens. Quote, this lawsuit would have put an end to guys financially subsidizing girls to party at nightclubs. However, thanks to the institutionalized bias against men in America and judges gone wild, the law now is that females cannot be discriminated against by nightclubs. Men can be. Unquote. In a December 3rd, 2008 decision, federal judge Pauley approved the U.S. government's use of secret proceedings to find U.S. citizen husbands of alien wives guilty of battery. The proceedings are kept secret from only the husband, not the alien wives, various government officials, or various feminist groups. So this article goes on saying men just don't count in the Federal District Court of New York. In a slipshod opinion that reflects Judge Pauley's effort to give men's rights the bum rush out of his court, he ignored the law and invented facts because of the ever-present bureaucratic zeal to curry favor with the feminists. The case challenged the constitutionality of certain provisions of Violence Against Women Act that allow alien females to fraudulently gain U.S. citizenship by falsely accusing their U.S. husbands of battery. Under the act, the husband has no notice nor opportunity to refute the charges against him. The so-called evidence used for finding him guilty comes from his ex-wife, her immigration lawyer, and feminist counselors. If by chance the American man somehow gets evidence to the government that shows his alien wife is lying, the evidence ends up in the garbage. Judge Pauley disdainfully brushed aside any concern for the rights of the husbands, which is common in the court of the Southern District of New York, to rule that such Nazi-like proceedings don't injure the husband. Take a minute. Would you want the U.S. government listening only to your ex-wife, her lawyer, and various feminists to decide whether you committed felonies and misdemeanors against her? You know they are going to find you guilty because you're not there. The government then promises that no harm will come to you because of all its findings will be kept secret, except from your ex-wife, her lawyer, various feminists, and local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies.
Might as well broadcast it, right?
Yes, correct. Oh, and by the way, if any of the government's decisions about you committing committing crimes, let me read that over again. If any of the government's decisions about you committing crimes leaks to the general public, there is not a thing you can do legally. There are no lawsuits or administrative proceedings you can bring to correct the false record or keep it from being published. To judges like William Pauley, such are not injuries because they are injuries to males, not females. But there's something more important than Judge Pauley's spinning of the law to favor feminists. Ask yourself, does this government process seem fair to you? The heart of the matter is that democracy implies respect for the elementary rights of man. However, suspect or unworthy these men may be, a democratic government must therefore practice fairness, and fairness can rarely be obtained by secret one-sided determination of facts, decisions of rights, and then they quote a court case there.
Okay.
Okay, John.
Any comment on that?
Just one comment.
Okay.
This article is talking about discrimination against men, and women also are discriminated in different areas. So we try to have a balance. John?
But what is really interesting about this latter part of what you were reading there is the fact that a foreign lady can come get married to an American, and then all she has to do to get her citizenship is to plead domestic violence, and that gives her all the rights of a citizen, because if she's been violated somehow through this domestic relationship, then all of the resources of the United States government can come to her rescue, because she's been violated by an American citizen. Sometimes these well-intended domestic violence and other types of protections have unintended consequences. No one thought, or should have thought, that you could gain citizenship simply by exercising your rights under the Violence Against Women's Act, but somebody may have considered that, and it went through anyhow. So now we may have many citizens of the United States simply because of trickery under the Violence Against Women's Act. Someone told me to pay attention to this several years ago, and I didn't do it. I'm beginning to realize what a strain on American culture this Violence Against Women's Act is playing right now. And our vice president to come, Joe Biden, was the one who authored the Violence Against Women's Act. So we may have more and more of the unintended consequences rising from very poor structured laws which leave equity behind and turn things over to wicked judges like you were reading about here, this Pauley, who can interpret things any way he pleases. There are people in the land who are concerned about the way that courts are going. You can be assured that there's going to be somebody watching so long as Terrance is around. Terrance Walker is one who looks into court matters and who takes seriously issues of equity, matters of justice, and a few other things. In a little bit, we're going to be looking into a film, into a tape that talks a little bit about equity issues. One in which I've been urging that we look at the broader picture of this problem of disproportionate entry of uh, black children into foster care. Because I believe that even though there's a disproportionate number of people, I also believe that there is a broader issue in foster care that has to do with the way social workers deal with cases. And in my opinion, it is inappropriate when you can exercise common sense and appropriate protocol to switch that to some kind of a scheme to appease folks. I don't think 2.5 days of learning someone's culture is a real good way of removing the problems that social workers are engaged in when they deal with removing children from homes. A child removed from the home is a tragedy, a terrible tragedy, particularly if it's avoidable. And to say that it's a greater tragedy because of the color of the skin is a problem in and of itself. The race, the background is irrelevant if the child is not with his own or her own parents. That is the big tragedy, not the color of the skin or the background of the folks. Now, it is true that there are some problems with the way social workers are dealing with other cultures. I readily admit that there are problems, but that is not the broader problem. The problem is there is a difficulty in the way they are removing children, and it's sad that they are removing many, many black children from the homes where there are other alternatives. And they're moving them not because the children would be better off, not because of the best interest of the child. They're moving them because the dollars demand it. In other words, if Iowa can pick up a few $1,000,000 more from removing children from homes and put them in foster care, and remove them from foster care and put them into adoption, it's the money that does the speaking, not the best interest of the child. And I think we need to look back at that. There are some real bad issues here. And those issues are being backed up in the courts. Let's look for someone that can tell us a little bit about the problems in the courts, and someone who is the judge of the judges, Terrance Walker.
Well, thanks a lot, John. You always give me a good run up, build me up probably even more than I probably should be, but appreciate it. Yes, I'm the judge of the judges because somebody has to judge the judges, and nobody is judging the judges, unfortunately. So we have to do it ourselves. I think that hopefully we're going to be seeing some big changes in the American justice system. You know, that was the whole run up to the campaign for the 2008 presidential campaign here. We do. We're slated to have, I think, the first black attorney general. Let's hope he can make some changes, but I don't know. I think that the American justice system is like the Titanic. Hopefully this guy can turn it around, but I don't know. I think we might be hitting the iceberg pretty soon. Um, with so many things going on, John, you cite some examples. Don, every week you cite some examples, and every week I cite some examples. There's plenty more than that go along. But one of the things I wanted to share with you, just a little anecdotal story here. Um, these are kind of the bizarre things that I think are going on in our American justice system here, that I find kind of bizarre. It's terrible that enough that we have a justice system where you never know what's going to happen. When you bring a case to the court, it's like a crapshoot. Now you might have the same sort of set of facts as the next person that's going to court in the next court case, but when you're going in front of the courts, it's still like a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen, and they might abide by the rules. They might not. They might view the rules in a different way. They might view the facts in a different way. Just depends on who you have in front of you. But one interesting case I wanted to point out, I don't typically do this with just the bizarre stories, but I thought this was bizarre enough to share. This was on freep.com, free press. It's entitled "The Judge to Annoying Web Poster Go to Jail." But now he says he may have gone too far. Hearing is today, and this is December 10th, 2008, posted online at freep.com. Now, on the Wayne County probate judge, David Szymanski, has concluded maybe it wasn't a great idea to jail a woman for writing about her court case on a website. Now, you see, Diane Anderson posted a website, put a website up, David Carl Anderson and elderabuse.com. Now, she's fighting her brother, who's a lawyer, and fighting him, I guess, in probate court over the whole dealings with their mother and her estate. Well, I guess the judge, David Szymanski, got a little ticked off because the lady put up a website and she was very argumentative in her case, and it's a rather opinionated website, David Carl Anderson and elderabuse.com. It contains commentary on the case and their family, and a lot of different opinions and a lot of stuff about not only David Carlson but the judge. Well, the judge got ticked off about this, jailed the woman twice, and kept her in jail. Ordered her to shut the site down immediately, and basically said the website had to be shut down or else she wasn't going to be released. Now, how is someone that is supposed to have computer access going to disable a website in the confines of jail? I mean, the order itself didn't really even make any sense. So he backed down. The judge did anyway, and apparently, I don't know if he had some flack from some outsiders or someone that Diane Anderson knew, or maybe he and his staff actually researched the legality of what they're doing, because he turns around and says, well, if a judge can't take it, he should find another profession. So I guess he had a moment of clarity and a moment of remorse about what he did. But according to Lynn Niehoff, a University of Michigan law professor and First Amendment expert, said that the judge's order to close the site clearly violated Anderson's free speech rights. Shutting down a website is unconstitutional prior restraint. And even more so, I would add, because this was this lady's take on her case, which there were no other privacy concerns concerning the case. Clearly, the case didn't involve a minor child, didn't involve any sort of protect or non-protected speech. Everything that they were discussing in that court, average ordinary Joe could have walked in and observe the case and form their own opinion. Now, the judge is going to go and prevent everybody from talking about the case? No, they can't do that. If it was something that was protected, such as a case in which he thought that the lady was too argumentative, and he got embroiled in the whole controversy and went and acted out on in a personal nature. Now, the good thing is she got the website back up and it's still up and running. But the bad thing is, whereas the judge overstepped the bounds of this woman's First Amendment rights, she has no legal recourse because judges are immune from lawsuit. Period. Anything to do with in their court or in their office, they are totally immune from lawsuit. So here's this lady who's been jailed for a total of about 8 hours in violation of what is supposed to be her constitutional First Amendment rights. Now, this wasn't the 26th Amendment. This was the First Amendment. This is one of the cornerstones of the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech. But this lady was jailed 8 hours by a judge who has immunity for his acts. But these are kind of the bizarre things that go on in this courtroom, and this is courtrooms here in the United States, and this is why I say the American justice system is like the Titanic. And pretty soon, I'm sad to say, it just looks to me like it's just going to hit an iceberg pretty soon. One other note, do you have a minute? I was going to share with you a little bit about how some of the other people observe justice, and that picture right there. Now, in other parts of the world, and I had to share this story too. Some people take it upon their own to inflict their own brand of justice, and maybe that's what we need to do here in America. Just throw a shoe at somebody.
And who is that, Terrance, that is getting shoe thrown at?
That's your president,
Right
President
up front.
Bush.
That was just on the news in the last, 2 days?
Yeah, it's been on there repeatedly because it's the most bizarre incident, that has happened in the whole. One of the most bizarre incidents that's happened to President Bush in America. But I tell you what, he's a good ducker. He must have been training for that.
So, in other words, what President Bush said went against the grain of that news reporter that's throwing the shoe. It really ticked him off what he was hearing.
I think that the guy was already disgruntled. I mean, he had a long history of being against the whole occupation, so he was fed up. That's what happens when people get fed up. But, luckily it was just a shoe.
Right.
For President Bush's sake, anyway. But I'll digress. I know we've got some other topics to discuss, and I just wanted to.
Well, thank you much. It's good to have you back on the air here. We haven't seen you around for a while, and it's just good that that you could join us once again. Don, you might want to pick up a book here. We'll take a look at 2 or 3 pages. I don't think we'll delve into it a whole lot, but you find a good stopping place there when you get started. The book is called Taken into Custody. Far too many families are taken into custody of family court. These are primarily divorce cases, but they can also be child abuse cases in which the court sort of just takes over and makes decisions for your children. And they keep saying that it is in their best interest. And guess who is the one who now decides the best interest? You see, the best interest of the child should be vested with mom and dad. But once the court steps in, they become the new mom and dad, giving a lot less attention and care as to what that is all about. Well, Taken into Custody is a new book written by Stephen Baskerville, who has taken a lot of interest. Do you have the pages? You've got pages there that you can read, sure. I hope all the words are on the pages. I tried to enlarge them so you, hoping that not too many of those words bounce out to the margins.
Looks pretty good,
But
John.
you bet. And then we'll take a look at a tape of a session where they're trying to improve the child abuse laws. Maybe I'm too impatient, but I don't see the kinds of changes taking place. You see, in the next General Assembly, there's not going to be a lot of money to spend. They're going to have to go in there with hatchets to slice budgets, and that's probably a good idea. But I think instead of figuring out how they're going to spend more money than we take in, they should spend a little more time and effort on how are we going to do the best with what we have. You see, a lot of the changes that need to be made in the laws, and I imagine Terrance would even agree with this, a lot of the changes we need to make in reform of the courts don't require more money. In fact, if you reduce the caseload, you're going to run the courts with less and fewer dollars. So perhaps we ought to spend a lot of time in the legislature determining how we are going to spend or how we are going to do a better job with less money.
Well, you see, I think the problem with that, and I hate to interrupt you, the problem with that is that the legislature is run by lawyers. So the lawyers don't want to put themselves out of business.
That's
So
right.
why would they allow for less litigation? It doesn't make any sense to them. It would be detrimental to their whole career.
That's right. And lawyers like that are $300 and $400 an hour lawyers don't want to lose those kinds of privileges. Status quo is probably the goal for a lot of our agencies. In fact, the agencies would like to expand, greater and greater influences, greater and greater staffs. Well, you might find something that is key there in one chapter, Don. Tell us the chapter, and do you have them all straightened up?
I think so.
Ready to roll? Okay. And you terminate it when you're ready. Okay, Don?
This is actually chapter 1 I'm starting to read from that book John quoting, Taken into Custody. There's a quote at the beginning here of chapter 1. Comes from the person's name is Franz
Kafka.
Kafka, comma, the trial. And he's referring to his own trial, I'm sure. He says in a paragraph, "There can be no doubt that behind all the actions of this court of justice, that is to say in my case, behind my arrest and today's interrogation, there is a great organization at work. An organization which not only employs corrupt warders, office inspectors, this is not English wording, so it's a little bit confusing here, and examining magistrates. We do have magistrates here. But also has at its disposal a judicial hierarchy of high, indeed at the highest rank, with an indispensable and numerous rentoon of servants, clerks, police, and other assistants, perhaps even hangmen." I remember a case 20 years ago. They referred to the judge as a hanging judge we had here in our area. In other words, he didn't have a conscience. Whatever he wanted to rule on, he could go sleep at night, even though he had just sentenced somebody to a hanging. or some other unjust action. This quote goes on. He says, "I do not shrink from that word, hangman, and the significance of this great organization, gentlemen. It consists in this, that innocent persons are accused of guilt, and senseless proceedings are put in motion against them." The chapter goes on and quoting actual situation, "No one realizes it can happen until it happens to them." How very true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we keep talking about this, and people tune into this program, and some of them may have never heard of it. DHS comes knocking on the door, and all the actions that happens in the courts. A lot of people don't comprehend, but then there's a lot of people out there that do, that are seeing families being destroyed out there. It goes on. "A man comes home one day to find his house empty. On the table is a note from his wife saying she has taken the children to live with her sister or parents or boyfriend or to a battered women's shelter. Soon after comes a knock on the door. He is summoned to appear under an emergency motion to a family court within a few hours in a hearing that lasts a few minutes. His children are legally removed from his care and protection. His right to make decisions about them are abrogated, and he is ordered to stay away from them most or all the time. He is also ordered to begin making child support payments. An order is entered to garnish his wages, and his name is placed on a federal government database for monitoring delinquents. If he tries to see his children outside the authorized time or fails to make the payments, he can be arrested. Without being permitted to speak, he is then told the hearing is over. No members of his family, the public, or the press have been permitted to be present, and no record will remain of what was said." It's interesting. No record will remain. This scene with variations is acted out in America's hundreds, perhaps thousands of times every day. Yes, we see that down in our own court system in Polk County, and other people see it in their own counties. It's going on all the time. The man may be accused of domestic violence or child sexual abuse, in which case there may be no hearing at all, or he is not notified of it. But the police will simply come to his door and order him to leave. Leave his home within hours or even minutes, even if no evidence has been presented against him. Without being formally charged, he will not be allowed to see his children at all, or perhaps only with a supervisor present, or at a visitation center where he and his children will be observed, and for which he will pay an hourly rate. The man may also be ordered to pay alimony and the fees of lawyers he has not hired, and threatened with arrest if he refuses or is unable to pay. The mother may take the children hundreds of thousands or thousands of miles away where he either cannot see them or see them at all, or he must quit his job and leave his home to do so. Or perhaps he is the one that leaves with the children and she finds the note. I've never heard that happen before. It's always a woman that does that, but that probably happens. Whatever the complications, the court will act now and ask questions later. He is stripped of custody, refused access to his children, and ordered to pay. My thought is when a wife does this, leaves a note and takes off, she is listening to advice of somebody to do that, but she has no idea of the outcome of what she has done, the destruction it'll do to her own children, when she thinks she is actually trying to protect herself and her children, which may be justifiable, but when you get the court system involved, they take total control. His story goes on. His protests that he has done nothing wrong will be of no avail, and his request to know the allegations against him will be met with silence. They won't give him any paperwork. Probably is none. He will be assured that the order is temporary, sure, until they write up another one, and that eventually there will be a trial. Eventually. At which he will be the defendant. He will be required to hire a lawyer and submit to humiliating questions about the most intimate matters of his private life. If he refuses to hire a lawyer, he will be ordered to pay his spouse's lawyer. Either way, he will pay $50,000 to $150,000 and possibly much more in hopes of seeing his children. We just got an email a couple weeks ago where the guy put out $1 million in his case trying to get it turned around. Sounds like this case here. He put out $1 million, and the court at that point in time ruled against him, and he gave up and committed suicide. This article goes on. If he refuses to answer questions or to pay, he can be jailed without trial and without a lawyer and lose access to his children altogether. If he objects, he can be ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The state seizes his children with no burden of proof to justify why. See right there, the mother, when she starts this action, she has no idea of the outcome of how the damage it's going to be to her children in the action she's doing against her husband. She may be ticked off real good, ticked off with her husband, but she doesn't realize the consequences when she involves the court system and asks for an attorney's help. Okay, it goes on. The burden of proof is on the father to demonstrate why they should be returned. When he goes to trial, the most private corners of his and his children's lives will be scrutinized with an intensity that attorney Jed Abraham characterizes as an interrogation. Armed with inside information supplied by his most intimate and trusted confidant, the court will probe the deepest, well, the attorneys will actually, they'll question you, will probe the deepest recesses of not only his life, but his mind and soul. That's what they do in the China actions. And in the termination of parenting rights, they dig to the heart. He will be asked if he loves his children. How much does he love them? Does he kiss them? Where does he kiss them? What does he say to them? What does he do with them? What does he do to feed them? How does he bathe them? And where does he take them? Why does he take them there? Why doesn't he take them there? Why did he buy this? Why didn't he buy that? In other words, they try to smear your reputation as though a man can't do anything personally for his children. Only a mother can do everything for the child. So they try every tactic they can in court to make the father look terrible. Nothing is too private for the eyes and ears of the court, and no answer is correct. If he works long hours, he is a terrorist who neglects his children. In other words, he's always working, but he's neglecting his children, is what they're trying to say. If he cares for his children, he is failing to earn as much income for them as he might.
Okay.
John?
Okay. Thank you. That's just a taste of what you'll find if you pick up the book Taken into Custody by Stephen Baskerville. I thought it looked very close to what we were talking about, and Don found a number of instances where we have cases it looked like that book was talking about. Well, we want to move quickly to a meeting which is of a council that talks about child advocacy. In fact, the council is called Council on Child Advocacy. Its membership is appointed by the governor. I wish that we had people on this council that were citizens, that people who were well acquainted with the harm that's done, so that they could readjust or reshape laws rather than to vote constantly for the status quo. But this was a strange taping because I started taping during a discussion. They had a discussion, and then they opened the meeting, which I thought was a strange way of talking about it. But the discussion starts out talking about the disproportionate, or at least it mentions disproportionality of black children in foster care. And I think that's a tragedy all by itself, to remove any child from the home. To do it through bias is wrong. To try to correct a problem by simply correcting the bias is also wrong, because it's focusing on a discriminatory element in order to correct a bigger problem. The bigger problem is total incompetence on the part of the Department of Human Services and its failure to find an appropriate set of guidelines and protocol before removing children. And then another one would be, I think that they should exercise, is total restraint from removing children, because unless it's absolutely necessary for the child's interests, the child should not be removed. Well, let's go and we'll listen to just a few minutes of what this council has to say. They're the ones that will go to the legislature with ideas for changing our statutes.
But we've got some things that we're going to look at some relative placements as a pilot in an area where both DHS and the courts think that would be helpful. And I'm kind of excited. This one's not quite well gelled yet, but there are a couple counties in the state that really have the highest disproportionate rate of African American kids in the foster care system. What's that?
John Freeman.
And so, yeah.
It is. That's where it's surprisingly enough. It's almost, it's off.
Again, working with DHS, Beatty's folks, we're looking at changing how we do those reviews, maybe doing them, not waiting 6 months, but doing them kind of right off the bat, and then working with the community that's there, that's looking at those issues, come up with the kinds of questions and situations and things that the board can do to help DHS understand why there's disproportionality, to validate their decisions, or to try to move the case quicker in a different direction. So we're kind of excited about that one too. We're going to pull there's a DMC Resource Center, something in University of Iowa School Social Work, Family Centered.
Yeah.
So they're going to, and those are some things that are.
Well, that's an area that needs to be addressed. But those two counties are way out of sync.
Actually, since you asked, we got one more pilot that we're probably going to do. We just haven't figured out all the details yet. Working with the substance abuse system. Find a way of having the board not just look at the DHS case plan, but also look at the substance abuse treatment agencies' treatment plans, or those parts of it that are relevant to what's going on with the kid, and kind of provide a forum for the substance abuse system to be looked at the same time as the child welfare system for a given case. So the board can help understand, help the two systems connect perhaps.
Would that be related to the kid or to the parents?
It'd be the parental substance abuse. I mean, there's so many interactions between a child welfare case plan that the parent shall receive substance abuse treatment, and and that it's often the reason why TPRs proceed, because treatment's tough to do.
Well, especially,
frames and,
we struggle in this state because we're a largely rural state. You struggle with services in rural areas. If you get convicted of a drug possession offense, you lose your driver's license. And if you're sitting in some small community where there's no treatment in your community, you know, if you're in Des Moines, you can get on the
Director
bus. and go
is
treat,
Jerry
probably. If you're in a
Foxhoven.
small rural community, you don't have a driver's license, and how do you get to services?
And,
You know,
and
it's a
right,
huge,
just
it's a
the
huge
real
struggle.
nuts and bolts problems, there's also
Yeah.
you know, it varies by part of the state, as you all know, and by case. There's some places where the substance abuse treatment world and the child welfare world, I mean, they're partners. They walk hand in hand. There's other places, though, where a treatment plan is written without even knowledge of what's in the child's case plan and vice versa. So that, you know, you've got two different systems telling the same person to do two different things. So we're hoping that we can the boards can look at those kinds of situations and try to help align those different plans for the same situation, same family.
Are you plugged into the court improvement project with that?
Well, to the extent that if we do it in one area, we probably will be reviewing cases that aren't part of the drug court.
Right.
So, yeah, no,
That's kind of what Drug Endangered Children's been trying to come to grips with. We overlap with the drug court efforts, but there's so much that's not covered by the drug court efforts that we're hoping we can kind of.
in fact, it was interesting, the one place we're looking, I talked to the judge there, because, you know, we weren't going to do something that they were opposed to. And he was all for it, but he also pointed out that most of the cases in the drug court in that area, they don't involve children in placement. So there was a real easy way of connecting to that one without having to worry too much about coordination. Because most of the cases, we'll only be reviewing cases where children are removed. Yeah, there's lots of different forces out there to try to coordinate with. Aren't you sorry you asked, Jerry?
No, that's great. Maybe we should go ahead and get started. I don't know if we're gonna have more people coming or not, but we may as well get started and move forward. So I'm calling us to order. We received, and if you didn't receive them, you'll see a copy in the middle of the table if you need one. The minutes from September 9th of 2008. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to those minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
More moves?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes of September 9th be approved as written. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Well, about the time they're getting started, we'll need to stop here. We only have a few minutes left. This is a council on child advocacy
One of the
that
main
is looking
things
into
that
the
we wanted
laws
to talk about
that
today was to make
run
sure
the
that
child
we
protection
worked on
systems.
this panel
They give
recommendation
ideas
to
to the
make
Department of Human Services what changes to be made.
recommendations every year.
This council is
And what Ray did was
appointed by
put a little
the
sheet
Iowa governor.
saying what over the past year there have been some
We'll see you next